Middleweight, the most complete division in the UFC, where speed meets power and precision meets violence. Over the years, a few names have made this division feel unsafe for everyone else in it. Killers who didn't just win fights, they made opponents question walking into the cage at all. Today, we're counting down the 5 scariest middleweights in UFC history. Fighters whose reputation alone could shift a fight before it even started. Let's get into it. Number 5. Adesanya isn't just a middleweight. He's a walking horror movie for anyone standing across the octagon from him. Nicknamed the Last Stylebender, Adesanya built his reputation on something most fighters never master: unpredictability. He didn't fight like a boxer. He didn't fight like a kickboxer. He fought like a blend of everything: Muay Thai angles, karate feints, boxing combinations, all stitched into one terrifying, ever-shifting rhythm. For over half a decade, Adesanya dominated the 185-pound division of the UFC. He racked up double-digit wins inside the promotion, defended his middleweight title multiple times, and became a 2-time UFC middleweight champion, a feat only a handful of fighters in the history of the sport can claim. What made him scary wasn't just the finishes. It was the mind games before the finishes even happened. Adesanya was a predator who studied his prey. He'd stand at range, hands low, head moving, almost inviting opponents to make a mistake. And when they did, he punished them with surgical precision. His striking IQ was on another level. He didn't just react, he calculated. Every step, every feint, every subtle shift of weight was part of a bigger plan unfolding in real time. His footwork alone made him a nightmare matchup. He could control distance like a chess grandmaster controls a board, always just out of range, always one step ahead. Opponents who tried to rush him walked into counters. Opponents who waited got picked apart slowly, methodically, until the fight was already lost before it looked like it. But it wasn't only the skill that made him terrifying, it was the presence. Adesanya walked to the cage like a performer stepping onto a stage he owned. Confidence dripped off him. He talked, he danced, he toyed. And somehow, that showmanship made him even scarier, because it told you he wasn't afraid. He wasn't just fighting to win, he was fighting to make a statement. Born in Nigeria and raised in New Zealand, Adesanya's journey to the top of one of the most dangerous sports on the planet is a story of reinvention. He didn't come from a wrestling background. He didn't come from a traditional MMA gym system. He came from kickboxing, a striking base so clean, so refined, that when he transitioned to mixed martial arts, it looked like he was playing a different sport than everyone else. That's the scariest part about Adesanya. He made elite fighters look like they were moving in slow motion. His reflexes, his reactive counters, his ability to read an opponent's intentions before they committed to them, it all pointed to a fighter who wasn't just physically gifted, but obsessively studied the art of not getting hit while making sure the other guy did. Number 4. Anderson Silva. Before there was a Last Stylebender, there was the Spider. And for nearly a decade, Anderson Silva didn't just beat middleweights, he hunted them. Silva's reign at 185 pounds remains one of the most dominant championship runs in the history of combat sports. He held the UFC middleweight title for years, stacking up title defenses that still stand as a record most consider untouchable. Fighter after fighter walked in with a game plan. Almost none of them left with it intact. What made Silva terrifying wasn't brute force. It was the sheer artistry of violence. He fought with his hands down, chin exposed, taunting, almost as if daring opponents to hit him. And they'd try, and they'd miss, again and again. Silva moved like he could see punches before they were thrown, slipping strikes by fractions of an inch with a calm, almost bored expression on his face. That calmness was part of the terror. Silva never looked rushed, never looked panicked. Even when he was being hunted himself, he carried himself like a man who already knew how the story would end. His striking was a mixture of Muay Thai brutality and pure improvisation. Elbows, knees, spinning strikes, counters that came out of nowhere. Silva didn't fight in patterns opponents could study. He fought in moments of pure instinct, and that unpredictability made him nearly impossible to prepare for. Born and trained in Brazil, Silva carried the artistry of Brazilian martial arts into every performance. He wasn't just fighting to win. He seemed to be fighting to create something beautiful and devastating at the same time. Fans didn't just watch his fights. They studied them, rewound them, tried to understand how a human being could move like that under the threat of real danger. Part of what made Silva so attractive as a fighter was the sheer theater of it all. He'd showboat mid-fight. He'd lean back from strikes with his hands still down. He'd taunt world-class killers in the middle of live combat, and somehow make it look effortless rather than reckless. That kind of confidence isn't common. It's the kind that either gets a fighter knocked out cold or turns them into a legend. For Silva, it was almost always the latter. His reach, his length, his ability to control range while appearing completely relaxed made him a matchup nightmare for nearly every style thrown at him. Wrestlers couldn't close the distance without eating strikes. Strikers couldn't outstrike a man who seemed to know their combinations before they threw them. Silva adapted mid-fight in real time, a rare trait among even the greatest fighters ever to compete. Even years into his career, long past his physical prime, Silva's aura never disappeared. Younger, hungrier fighters still walked into the cage against him carrying a subtle unease, because everyone remembered what he was capable of, and nobody could guarantee that version of him wasn't going to show up one more time. Anderson Silva's legacy isn't measured only in wins and title defenses. It's measured in the fear he installed in an entire division for the better part of a decade. He turned some of the most dangerous middleweights on the planet into cautious, hesitant versions of themselves. Because when you're facing a predator who never looks worried, worry becomes contagious. That's the mark of true greatness in this sport. Not just being hard to beat, but being the kind of fighter whose name alone changes how an opponent prepares, moves, and breathes before the fight even begins. Number 3. Alex Pereira. Some fighters earn fear through technique. Others earn it through pure, undeniable power. Alex Pereira earns it through both, and that combination makes him one of the most bone-chilling middleweights to ever step into the UFC. Pereira's story inside the promotion is almost mythical. In a remarkably short span, he climbed from newcomer to UFC middleweight champion, then later moved up and captured UFC gold in a second weight class entirely, a feat that instantly placed him among an elite group of fighters in company history. But it's not just the accolades that make Pereira terrifying, it's the way he carries them. Pereira walks to the cage with the calm of a man who has already won the fight in his head. No wasted energy, no nervous energy, just a quiet, heavy stillness, the kind that makes opponents uneasy before a single strike is thrown. His kickboxing background is the foundation of the fear. Pereira's striking isn't flashy for the sake of flash. It's brutally efficient, heavy hands, devastating kicks, precision that comes from years of world-class combat sport. When Pereira lands clean, fights end. Everyone watching knows it. Even his opponents know it, and that knowledge alone changes how they fight. There's a psychological weight Pereira carries into every walkout. His demeanor is almost eerily calm, barely emotional, rarely rattled, moving with the patience of someone who has been in far more dangerous rooms than a cage. That stoicism becomes part of the intimidation. Opponents can't read panic in him, because there rarely seems to be any. Pereira also possesses something rare in combat sports: True one-shot power in both hands and legs. A single connecting strike at any point in a fight can be the difference between a competitive bout and an instant, violent conclusion. That kind of power forces opponents to fight cautiously, to second-guess exchanges, to hesitate. And hesitation, in this sport, is often fatal to a fighter's chances. What makes him even more compelling as a personality is his humility outside the cage contrasted against his ruthlessness inside it. Soft-spoken, respectful, almost gentle in interviews, then transformed into a controlled, calculating force the moment the cage door closes. That contrast has made him one of the most talked about and magnetic figures in the entire sport. Pereira's movement, for a man his size, adds another layer of danger. He's not just powerful, he's precise, patient, and technically sound, picking his moments rather than rushing recklessly. That patience makes him even scarier, because opponents can't predict when the fight-ending strike is coming. It could be the first exchange, it could be the 15th. Pereira is comfortable waiting either way. Few fighters have entered the UFC with kickboxing pedigree as decorated as his, and even fewer have translated that pedigree into MMA success as quickly and violently as Pereira did. His transition wasn't gradual, it was immediate, explosive, and terrifying to witness in real time. Alex Pereira represents a rare blend in this sport, a fighter who is simultaneously calm and catastrophic, humble and ruthless, patient and explosive. That combination is exactly what makes him one of the scariest middleweights the division has ever seen. Number 2. Khamzat Chimaev. If fear had a face in the middleweight division, for a lot of fighters, it would look like Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev's rise through the UFC ranks has been almost unnervingly fast. Since his debut, he's built one of the most dominant, hard-to-look-away-from resumes in recent memory, moving through elite competition with a mixture of speed, power, and relentless aggression that few fighters at any weight class have ever displayed. What makes Chimaev genuinely terrifying is the sheer physicality he brings into every single exchange. He's a wrestler at his core, but not the cautious, point-scoring kind. Chimaev wrestles like he's trying to break something. Takedowns come with force. Control comes with pressure. Once a fight hits the mat with him, it rarely looks like a fair fight anymore. His cardio is another element that adds to the fear factor. Chimaev doesn't slow down. He doesn't seem to fatigue the way normal fighters do. He pushes a pace from the opening minute that most opponents simply cannot match, and by the time the fight is deep into its later stages, exhaustion becomes as dangerous an opponent as Chimaev himself. Beyond the physical gifts, there's a mentality that separates him from most of the division. Chimaev fights like someone with nothing to fear, because from his own perspective, there's rarely been anyone in the cage who could truly threaten him back. That fearlessness translates into relentless forward pressure, a refusal to back down, and an eagerness to engage in exchanges that most fighters would rather avoid. His combination of size, strength, and wrestling pedigree makes him a matchup nightmare regardless of an opponent's specialty. Strikers get taken down and smothered. Grapplers get out-muscled and out-positioned. There simply isn't an obvious blueprint for stopping him, and that lack of a clear answer is part of what makes him so unsettling to face. Chimaev's personality outside the cage only adds to his aura, confident to the point of controversy, blunt in interviews, and seemingly unbothered by the pressure of high expectations. He talks like a man who has already decided how dominant his career is going to be, and so far, his performances have mostly backed it up. Born in Chechnya and representing Sweden, Chimaev's background adds a layer of toughness to his persona that fans have gravitated toward. He fights like someone who has faced real adversity long before ever stepping into a cage, and that history seems to fuel an intensity that few opponents are mentally prepared to match. There's also an unpredictability to how dominant his performances can be. Number 1. Dricus du Plessis. At number 1, there's a middleweight whose danger comes from somewhere most fighters can't fake. An almost unshakable belief that he simply cannot be broken. That fighter is Dricus du Plessis. Du Plessis rose to become UFC middleweight champion through a combination of grit, unconventional technique, and a mentality that seems entirely immune to adversity. He's not the most textbook striker in the division. He's not the most decorated wrestler either. But what he brings into the cage is something arguably scarier than pure technical perfection. An opponent who refuses, on a fundamental level, to accept defeat. His fighting style is chaotic in the best possible way. Awkward angles, relentless pressure, strikes thrown from positions most coaches would discourage. And somehow, it works. That unpredictability makes him incredibly difficult to prepare for, because there's no clean blueprint to follow. Opponents can't rely on conventional analysis when the fighter in front of them doesn't fight conventionally. What separates du Plessis from a lot of his contemporaries is his composure in genuinely dangerous moments. Fighters who get hurt against him often expect to see him retreat, cover up, or play it safe. Instead, du Plessis leans forward. He engages harder. He turns adversity into fuel, and that mentality alone has broken the spirit of opponents who otherwise had him in trouble. South African by birth and representing his country proudly on the world's biggest stage, du Plessis brings a level of national pride and personal narrative into his fights that few others can match. He talks about legacy, about representing an entire continent of fans who rarely get to see one of their own reach the top of the sport. That purpose adds a weight to his performances that goes beyond just personal glory. His durability is a central part of what makes him terrifying. Du Plessis absorbs punishment that would end fights against other opponents, and instead of breaking down, he seems to get more dangerous as fights progress. That kind of resilience creates a psychological problem for opponents, because landing clean, hurtful strikes doesn't guarantee the fight is close to over. He's also a masterful pace pusher. Du Plessis doesn't just survive rounds. He makes opponents fight every single second of every single round, refusing to allow moments of rest or recovery. That nonstop pressure wears down even the most well-conditioned fighters, turning fights into wars of attrition that du Plessis has repeatedly proven he's built to win. Outside the cage, his confidence borders on audacious. He speaks with total conviction about his place at the top of the division, undeterred by doubters or bigger names. That self-belief translates directly into how he performs when the pressure is highest, and it's part of why fans and analysts alike have struggled to bet against him. What makes du Plessis the scariest name on this list isn't a single elite attribute. It's the complete unpredictability of facing someone who refuses to follow the expected script of a fight. Opponents can have a perfect game plan, execute it well, even hurt him, and still lose, because du Plessis simply does not fight like someone who believes losing is an option. That mentality, paired with genuine championship-level skill, is what makes Dricus du Plessis the #1 scariest middleweight in the history of the UFC.